Kenya has sworn in its new president, William Ruto, after a divisive poll. The former deputy president beat his rival Raila Odinga by less than 2% last month. The vote in East Africa's largest economy was largely peaceful and free of the violence that has marred past elections. Odinga challenged the result, but Kenya's Supreme Court upheld President Ruto's victory. Outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta, who backed Odinga in the election race, promised a smooth transfer of power. Ruto is now the fifth president in Kenya's post-independence history. CGTN spoke to Kenyans, and here are their expectations for the new president.
We mostly need the prices of basic commodities to go down because the economy is in a bad shape.
Cooking oil, petrol and fertilizer. At least if the president reduces prices of these commodities, life will be much easier for us.
I would like the president to help us as motorbike riders and the youth. The president can help the youth grow their talent so that it does not go to waste.
Kenya's president-elect William Ruto campaigned on the platform of reducing the price of maize flour. Like many countries on the continent, Kenya faces the challenge of food security. This year, the country has experienced higher food prices than ever before. Among these commodities is maize, which is a staple food item. Kenya's new administration has promised to develop a lasting solution following the COVID-19 pandemic and the current drought the country is experiencing. Let's bring in Timothy Njagi, a research fellow at Tegemeo Institute, an agricultural research institute based in Nairobi. Timothy, thank you for your time tonight. Now, food security, and particularly maize, is a big concern for Kenyans. What explains food price hikes in the country?
Thank you and for having us on the show. This year, we've seen a combination of shocks that has led to the high food prices that we've experienced in this year. So we've had a drought that has been ongoing, and this year it actually became worse. It started last year and then spilling over into this year. And it has also increased in the areas that it has affected. Initially, it was just in the north of Kenya, but it has actually gone now up to parts of central and eastern Kenya. Also, the weather this year has been quite unfavorable. And then in addition to that, we've had external shocks, the first being the COVID shock that exacerbated the supply chain issues, leading to high input prices. And of course, the Russian war in Ukraine that led to higher input prices, especially for fertilizer, as well as grain, because those two countries are important sources of grain to Kenya.
Right, so you've mentioned quite a number of factors that have played into these price hikes the country has witnessed. You've mentioned drought, you've mentioned external shocks such as the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So the question is, how can the country then prevent future shocks and crises?
For future shocks, I think the first one, which is drought, is something that has been with us now with increasing frequency. There is need to make sure that we build resilience of our farmers to be able to deal with these shocks. This includes ensuring that they have the technologies that are required to be able to handle these shocks, and also investments in things like irrigation, which countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, have not done very well. For external shocks, I think the importance of trade and expanding the source market so that you're not reliant on one country. I think that needs to be a big lesson for this year, being strategic in terms of how we engage with partner countries, especially those who provide us with food.
Right, and you have indicated before that Kenya can benefit from the experience of other countries in the East African region. I think a good example is Ethiopia, which we now know it has increased cereal productivity, especially wheat, over the past 2 decades. Wheat, I think, over the last few years. Now, let's not forget that Kenya also produces wheat, but not to the scale at which we've seen Ethiopia recently do it. So how can Kenya learn from such countries? What has Ethiopia, for instance, managed to do?
Yeah, it's important to really learn from countries that are doing better than us. And the one thing that Ethiopia was able to do, they were able to restructure their input subsidy system and bundle it with extension. So farmers were not only getting cheaper inputs because they were subsidized, but they were getting knowledge and information from extension workers on how to use these inputs. And that learning, of course, over time, it becomes sustainable, and farmers are able to learn on how to produce better and improve productivity. In the case of Kenya, I mean, extension is something that has completely collapsed. for more than a decade now, and we've really not done anything to try and revive that. Yes, we've had input subsidy programs, but our model in the way the input subsidy program has been run has been quite inefficient. And 2 years ago, we started a much more better system, which is the e-voucher program. So for example, expanding that program to cover more areas would be better than the subsidy program that were there in the past. The other thing also, we need to ensure that farmers have better access to improved seeds which are tailored to the different ecological environments. Again, this becomes very important in light of climate change, to ensure that farmers are able to get appropriate seeds that will be able to do better in the conditions. Whether, for example, it's this year where we expect less rainfall, then we need to make sure that farmers can access seeds that will do better in those conditions.
All right, Timothy, thank you very much for your time. Timothy Njagi joining us via Zoom from Nairobi.